on CityCast Nashville. We're sharing the first in a series of stories we're hoping to do this year that take a very personal look at big political and cultural issues, because we want to try and understand the humans who are being impacted by policies that are often beyond their control. For today's show, we're joined by two moms whose children identify as something other than the gender they were assigned at birth. Taylor, who wishes to remain anonymous, recently moved out of Nashville, fearing for her trans femme genderqueer child's safety and future here. Lindsay Patrick Wright, a vocal political activist in the Nashville area, has decided to stay for the time being. She and her trans non-binary teenager Pip are active on social media and use their platform to educate others about what it means to grow up gender fluid. It's Tuesday, January 7th. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. Lindsay, I'd love to start with you. What can you tell us about your child and their journey?
So I've got a 15-year-old, and they, at 11, is when they came out as being lesbian. They were assigned female at birth, and they came downstairs one night, and they had a piece of paper behind their back, and then they were acting kind of sheepish, and they pulled the piece of paper out from behind their back, and it was the lesbian flag, which I had never seen before. And so I was like, well, those are really pretty colors. And then they were just kind of awkward with me, which is just not our relationship at all. And I was like, is there something else that you want to talk to me about this piece of paper? And they said, it's the lesbian flag. And I was like, are you trying to tell me that you're a lesbian? And they said, yes. And I was like, well, thank you for telling me. What does that mean to you? And they said, that means that I like girls. And a couple of years before that, when all of their friends were having crushes, their crush was on a girl. So we kind of saw that coming. And then a year later, when they were 12, they asked that we start using they and she kind of interchangeably. And then a few months after that, they were like, no, I really like they, them. It's been very much, they don't want to be put into a gender box. And that was pretty stable for 2 years, but it's been in the last year really where they've really gotten into clothes that they have enjoyed kind of being a little bit more fluid with their gender expression. Some days they feel very feminine. Some days they feel very masculine. And some days they don't want to be put into that box. So, right now we're just kind of going with the flow, similar to Taylor as a trans non-binary kid. We don't need or want any medical intervention. It's really just social at this point, and something that everyone in our family is and support group is very in tune with and supportive of. And Pip has been a wonderful teacher, really, to all of us. They are very forgiving when we mess up with their pronouns. What Pippi always says is, if it's an honest mistake, then it's a learning opportunity. If it's done maliciously, that's when it hurts. That's something that we could all learn from, really.
Taylor, real quick before we get to you, I just want to acknowledge for our listeners that both of our guests today have little animals in the background. So you may hear a jingling of a collar or, a dog barking or something. So that is what that is. All right, Taylor, back to you. You have two kids. Can you share a bit about them and what makes them amazing?
I have an older cisgender kid, and then I have a younger trans kid, and they're both amazing. And our oldest was always kind of a little fluid with gender expression, but very solidly cisgender. And so when our youngest started playing around with gender expression, like wearing things that maybe weren't stereotypical of their gender assigned at birth, or having different interests and toys and things like that. We just assumed it was similar to their older sibling. Then it became more and more apparent that they were having a different experience of gender and their gender identity, not just expression. Our youngest is trans and thriving and wonderful and exhausting as kids are in all the very typical kid ways. And our trans kid is not at the age of needing medical intervention. So it's really just been a process of supporting them and following their lead and, making sure that they have the affirmation and the support, and that we are, identifying them in the way that feels most true to who they are, which, means leaving room for kind of broadening that understanding for them and for us.
So I want to hear from both of you about maybe some past adventures you've both had while parenting a trans or gender fluid, genderqueer kiddo in Nashville.
Yeah. I mean, so much of parenting, I feel like, is just an adventure in general. Really, for our family, it's been relatively a non-issue. We've not made a big deal about it because our kids are who they are, and none of that has changed with changing up our language or, how they identify in the classroom or things like that. So that hasn't really been a huge adventure for us I mean that in a really good way.
Right.
But I think where those adventures have come in have been spending time at the Capitol trying to make things less bad for families like ours. And where my kids are concerned, that has just meant, going and waving a pride flag and watching mom be a little bit feisty and being really bored, sitting through a committee hearing or something like that. But, we've tried to shield them from that stuff. So, their adventure in that sense is really just exploring the Capitol and meeting their representatives and the nice ones in particular and climbing all the stairs and rolling down the hill at the Capitol. That was their experience of it.
But Taylor, despite all your activism, you decided to move from Nashville to a different state. What ultimately drove that choice?
It's something that honestly, probably since our kid we realized what was happening with our kid, but definitely since, I guess, 2023 when SB1 was proposed and then passed.
Right. So I want to just give some information for listeners who this topic is maybe new for them. Could you just go into detail about SB1?
Yeah. So that makes it illegal to receive or prescribe puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries for transgender youth. But these are the same the same drugs, procedures, whatever, that cisgender kids undergo all the time. Talked to a legislator who was like, oh yeah, my daughter takes blockers for precocious puberty. But because she was assigned female at birth, it's perfectly legal for her to say, I'm not ready to go through puberty as a young woman. And the doctor can give her that medication. Cisgender boys take growth hormones to grow taller or bigger or whatever. Cisgender girls, 17-year-olds can have breast augmentations legally in this state. It is an unequal application of medical care, which, as we heard argued at the Supreme Court, is discrimination, whether or not the Supreme Court will decide that. But one thing I think not everyone is aware of that I think everyone should be aware of is that originally SB1 included I don't know if provision's the right word. It included language that essentially named affirming your kid or seeking out treatment for your kid as child abuse. So that was one part also that my husband and I were like, I don't trust, frankly, my parents to not try to use that to take my kids from me, So the gravity of that, I think, is large.
We're back with Taylor, a mom of a trans child from Nashville who decided to move her family out of state. So Taylor, SB1 passes. What was your first reaction?
It kind of became I don't know if we're going to be able to stay here, but maybe things will get better. Well, we have time because, our kid really started expressing this gender identity at a really young age. So it gave us a lot of time. And we felt like we can wait and see what happens. And then through doing a lot of advocacy up at the Capitol and having conversations, one-on-one conversations with Republican legislators and them hearing me talk about my family and my story and beg them to just see us as human and to see me as a parent loving my child who would like to eventually be able to make informed healthcare decisions, whether that is to pursue medical care or not. And they either told me they agree with me and think that parents should get to make that choice, but they aren't going to stick their necks out for it because of just the state of things in the party, or they just flat out failed to recognize the humanity of my child and said that they talked to 2 other doctors that they decided they're going to trust rather than a whole body of research. And hearing the lies and the just like fear mongering and propaganda about like my sweet, cute little kid was really heartbreaking. And at the same time, listening to committee hearings about reproductive access, where my like value as a human was completely disregarded by legislators, I was like, if they can't even have empathy or care or recognize the value of women's lives, when all of these people came from one and most of them have a woman, a wife, a partner, they have a connection to women in their lives and they still don't have any empathy, I can't convince them to care about my kid. So that was kind of, I think, the moment I realized that we had to leave, partly also because I talked to my kid's pediatrician of, we've been with this pediatrician for 10 years. And in a time of life where my own parents rejected me because of my kid's identity and my decision to support and affirm my kid, this felt like a caring authority figure that I trust. And he was basically like, I think you all really should consider leaving.
So basically what I heard you say, Taylor, is the only gender affirming care your kid could get in Tennessee from your doctor is the advice to leave Tennessee. Basically.
Yeah, essentially. And he did so with it was a really painful conversation. Like he is certainly an affirming doctor and a very well studied and well respected, well established medical professional. He believes in supporting kids and the research behind all of that and everything. And yeah, the essentially medical advice he gave us was leave. Yeah. So all of that played into our decision to move. But I think the reason we went ahead and moved was, at their elementary school, if another parent found out that their kid used the bathroom with mine, they could sue our school. And that just is like disgusting to me. And I realized I don't want my kid being a second-class citizen. And I don't want my kid to hear these debates and to question their value. I know I can't shield them from it for forever, but I wanted to give them as many years of their childhood where they could just kind of build up an innate sense of self-worth and value before they, hear all of those things, so that maybe by the time they do, they know deep within them that they are good and they are wonderful just the way they are.
On the flip side, Lindsay, what is that experience like for you and Pip?
I actually live in Mount Juliet, so we're just a little east of Nashville. And when we go into Nashville, it certainly feels almost more like home. It feels like we can be ourselves a little bit more when we're in Nashville. That being said, we do try to live our lives as authentically as possible. And so that, Pippi doesn't hide who they are when we're out and about in Mount Juliet. And they are such a giving person that, we can't go out in public without my kids stopping someone and complimenting their hair. Pip is rocking a gay mullet right now. Inevitably, that person will be like, I love your hair. And it's just that little hey, I see you, and I think that your style is cool. That little validation when we feel like we're in an island out here in Mount Juliet, we're finding that we really aren't. That's been the most gratifying thing about me being very public about our journey and Pip also becoming quite the advocate themselves is the community that we have built here in Wilson County. And it really did start with Pip creating a logo that says Wilson County Values, and it has, the rainbow behind it. And it's largely taking back this idea that Wilson County Values means that gay people aren't welcome here. And so Pip created this logo, and I put it on shirts, and a bunch of people started buying it. And it created this really neat community that was always here. It just amplified it and said, we are here, we are valuable members of this community, and we're not going anywhere.
It sounds like you're doing an incredible job listening and just having them guide you in the advocacy. Is that true? Is that how you're feeling?
Yes. We are, as a family, we very much decided to be public because we've been building this community and connecting with other parents of gender nonconforming kids. We recognize that there is a privilege that comes with Pip's identity in that they don't need or want any medical intervention. And so we aren't breaking any laws or any future laws or whatever by just affirming our kids' identity. So we can be vocal about it, and we can kind of put a face on this movement that a lot of people are really trying to demonize. But yes, Pip does know at any point they can say, no, let's take a step back and let's just live our lives. And we're prepared for that.
And what does it feel like to live in a state that is actively legislating against you and your children's identity?
I think the most frustrating part for me as a parent is that a lot of this is being done under the guise of parents' rights. For example, the outing trans kids bill that was passed, that on a local level, that was here in Wilson County, that was put forward by one of our school board members. And it failed in this community because the community overwhelmingly showed up and said, we do not want that here. Well, that same school board member then took it to the state legislature and testified, and it became state law. And now we're forced to follow that in Wilson County schools, even though as a community, we very much stood up and said, we do not want this. So it really isn't about parents' rights. And that's what's really frustrating. It is, if you look at the actual laws that are being passed, they're being passed under the guise of a pretense that really doesn't exist when you take it all away. And so it really is just discriminatory and bullying.
Right. Lindsay, I'm curious, hearing that perspective, have you ever thought to leave Tennessee?
Oh, we certainly have a bug out plan. I mean, we have a bug out plan, not just for my child, but, as a person with a uterus in the state. But this is where we're from. My family is from Arkansas and Tennessee. Long, long, long history of being from Arkansas and Tennessee. And that's, being a loudmouth and getting up and talking about this. One of the things I hear more than anything from opponents, for lack of a better word, is go back to where you came from. And it's like, this is my home. This is where we want to live. We're looking at high school next year, and we could look at some private school options that would put us into Nashville, driving into Nashville every day. And Pip says, this is my home. I want to go to school with my friends. I want to fight for this place. And I have so much respect for them for that attitude, but they should just be worried about being a 15-year-old and not changing the state of our politics and being at the epicenter of a culture war right now.
Yes. All right. Well, what kinds of support systems have been most valuable for you both as parents? And then also a second part to that question is, if, say, I want to stand in the gap and support and protect my friends with children who are questioning or exploring their gender identity, what's something concrete I can do?
Honestly, part of what was so hard of leaving Nashville is that we had a really supportive community. And like Lindsay, I'm from Tennessee. My entire family, lineage is Tennessean, very firmly rooted and established in this state. And so leaving, not only I left behind a robust community that I spent decades building, but I also left behind the only home I ever knew. I've been in Tennessee longer than a lot of the legislators who were legislating this. Gina Bolso has been here for 6 years. And as much as I love Tennessee and think Tennessee is worth fighting for, it felt like we kind of were up against the wall in terms of like what we could offer our kid here. And, you know, we've had friends invite us for holidays when we haven't been doing those with family because my family largely rejected us. And like that kind of more concrete, tangible support and unconditional love from friends has really made a huge difference for us. And I mean, that is kind of like a cheesy non-answer, I guess, in terms of what people can do to support, you know, families like mine, kids like mine. But I mean, I think just like being present and believing that they're good parents that want the best for their kid, and not letting it change how you care for and love a kid because they're the same kid, you know? And I think speaking out vocally about your support is another big part of it because it is such a taboo issue. So even just like when the Supreme Court case happened, I had a few friends that texted me and were like, today's really hard. I'm really sorry. And I'm really thinking about you. And I'm never going to stop speaking up for and fighting for your kid. People who are willing to do that is a great way to support these kids and families like ours.
You know, Taylor and I know each other because we kind of find each other.
Mm-hmm.
When I went viral for yelling at the school board a couple of years ago, a group of moms of gender nonconforming kids were like, welcome to us. You are now part of us. And so that's why I have stayed public, is so that I can help connect others. And I think that's what we have been doing out of survival. So those that are out of our community, I think the best thing that you can do to help is be prepared to speak up. And I don't even mean like, you know, going down to the Capitol. I mean, you're at work and someone says something that is just completely bigoted. I'm really trying to empower people that have privilege to use that privilege. And it can be in just a dinner with your mom who says something that's just really out of touch with reality. One of the best analogies that my kid has taught me is the left-handed analogy when it comes to gender issues. Because what we hear most is, this is a fad, or this didn't used to happen, or where did this come from? All of a sudden, you know, used to be there were only two genders and now there's a bit. Anyway, before the 1950s, research didn't show that there were a lot of left-handed people, because what would society do if you showed a left-handed dominance? They would belt your left hand to the side of your body and force you to use your right hand. And now we know that almost a quarter of the population is left-handed, and it's just normal for us. And the best education is often just two people having a conversation, but you have to be brave enough to be uncomfortable with those conversations. And so if people do have questions, ask me. You know, I'd rather you put that burden on me, and I don't have all the answers. I certainly do not speak for all of the gender nonconforming community, especially because I walk through life as a cisgendered white lady. But I am happy to listen to those questions and get the answers and connect people with resources just to help them learn that these kids and these people, trans people, are not anomalies. They are just human beings that want to live their lives authentically and fully and have all of the protections that cisgender people have.
So, Lindsay, what would you say to parents who are really feeling that push-pull of, should I leave, should I stay here in Tennessee?
Honestly, if my kid was needing medical intervention, we would leave. That to me feels like the line. There are places like the Tennessee Equality Project is a really great resource, and they are offering quite a few sessions of making sure your passport's up to date, just answering some questions of the types of place like where Taylor moved that might not be as much of a culture shock for people, and it may be financially feasible. And then, you know, like Taylor was saying, I'm keeping my eye on the being charged with child abuse for using they, them pronouns with my kid, which is, it sounds like, an extreme hyperbole, but as we are seeing in Tennessee, it absolutely isn't.
Mm-hmm. Taylor, have you seen any changes in your kiddo since y'all left?
Both of my kids were having some tough, anxiety and feelings and behaviors and stuff for the first few months here. But now that school started a month after it started in Nashville, which was the longest summer ever, both of my kids have found friends, and it's amazing living in a state with a state income tax, and that puts money into things that better the lives of residents and not just tourists. So there's amazing offerings at the parks and at the school. After school stuff is incredible, and it's beautiful. There's sidewalks everywhere. We're enjoying life and living here. We miss our people so much. But, like I was saying a little bit earlier, I think that my trans kid is seeing a little bit more of themselves. I just love how they are just totally their own person and so confident and just like what they like, and they don't apologize for it. And so I think my kid has gained some amount of confidence, which is great for them existing out in the world. It's a little hard at home because I'm you need to dial it back. I actually do know more than you. But
no, I love it. Well, I just have one last question for you both. This really has been a very special conversation. So thank you both for giving time. What gives each of you hope when you think about your child's future?
I think that the trans adults, young adults, and youth like Pip that are, I'm going to get choked up, that are boldly being their authentic selves give me a lot of hope, because it just shows me what life can be for my kid. Not that those folks are living life without struggle, but as hard as it was listening into some of the Supreme Court hearing on SB1 and feeling a little bit of gloom about how that is going to play out, the fact that Chase Strangio, the first openly trans lawyer to argue in front of the Supreme Court, was there fighting for our kids was such a win, because he is doing something incredible. He's reached the paramount of success in his career, and also in terms of a life well lived. He's doing great work. And that is an example of what our kids can aspire to. There's so much grief and sadness in the trans community right now because of everything, but there is so much joy. There's just an abundant amount of joy in the trans community of people being their true selves in a way that is just, sometimes I wish I could be more authentically myself. And I feel inspired by, trans folks in the community that are, not letting themselves be held back by all these obstacles put in their way. And yeah, I think there are just some really amazing, incredible, inspiring trans adults and adolescents, youth, young adults, whatever, out there that I feel are paving the way for my kid and give me a great amount of hope and the kind of affirmation that trans lives can be full of joy and are full of joy and are full of beauty and accomplishment and success and fullness.
Lindsay.
I couldn't agree more. We do have some amazing people in the trans community to look to see them leading joyful, valuable lives. But just on a very personal note, I have learned so much from my kid. I wish I had half of their understanding of what is going on in their head and their heart. They're able to just roll with whatever kind of comes their way. Mm-hmm. Recently, I had been facing some online harassment personally. And it really got in my head a lot. And I stopped doing my usual content online of calling out legislators because I was worried about getting bullied. And I verbalized that to Pibby, and they said, that's what bullies are doing. They said, I don't want to make this about me, but the bullies in my middle school were trying to keep me from being myself. And what did you tell me? It's like, the best thing for you to do is to live authentically. And they said, well, I'm going to turn that right back around on you. And I just started weeping, and it was a joyful weeping because they're 15 years old, and that's a $150 therapy appointment right there. That truth bomb that they just dropped on me. And I immediately went home and made a video blasting our state senator. So by allowing people to dampen our spirit, that's letting them win. And this is too important for us to stop fighting. And what our fight looks like right now is being happy and being joyful and caring for others. And we're not going to stop doing that.
Just jumping off of that, I feel like there have been definitely moments where I'm like, am I giving up by leaving? Am I letting them win by leaving? But the thing is, I am not, because I refuse to let them dampen my kids' shine or take the joy out of our lives. Mm-hmm. Hopefully my kid will be able to continue this fight. And hopefully they don't have to fight. Hopefully the fight is won soon. But you know what I mean? It's not giving up or retreating. It is like moving forward to make sure that we don't let them win by our kid having to live in the closet or being afraid of being themselves.
I promise one last thing. Taylor reminded me of it, but I was just recently in a play called What the Constitution Means to Me. And it is a play about a 40-year-old woman examining her former love of the Constitution that clearly wasn't written for her. And one of the lines that really resonated with me, we performed this the week of the election, which was just very difficult to do. But the line is, my mom used to say, when you feel overcome by rage and despair, you have to imagine a woman walking along a beach with a dog. If you watch the dog, he's running back and forth, and it looks like progress is constantly being undone. But if you watch the woman, you see that she's moving steadily forward and forward and forward. And that's essentially what progress is. Right now, we are at a point in our country where we were showing progress and we have moved back, that we've been that dog that has run backwards on the beach. But we have to be that woman, or in mine and Taylor's case, that mom who is just moving forward and forward and forward for our kids.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. Do you have a personal story you'd like to share with us for a future episode? Well, why not email us, nashville@citycast.fm. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles!